Like Warren said, so I run Schell Games out of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. We've got about 95 folks. We do about 2/3 educational games and about 1/3 entertainment games. I also teach at the Entertainment Technology Center at Carnegie Mellon. Like Warren said, I used to work at Disney, and I wrote a book once called The Art of Game Design. And if you like that sort of thing, the second edition comes out next month, so there you go. Your Christmas shopping is done. So, like Warren was saying, I used to work at Disney. I never pursued a PhD, but I often feel like my PhD was working at Disney Imagineering, where I worked. I started as a programmer and eventually became the creative director of the Disney VR studio. And I learned so much about interactive entertainment there. The big project I was focused on there initially was this thing called DisneyQuest down in Orlando, Florida, which is Disney's virtual reality theme park. As they advertised it, 5 floors of virtual fun, right? So we built these big crazy things in there. And one of the last ones we built there was the Pirates of the Caribbean interactive ride. Has anyone here done that? Just out of curiosity, a few people? All right. So we had super fun building this thing. And for me, working on this project and some other projects, that's where I really got a lesson in what theming means at the Walt Disney Company. And the big premise of theming there is that theming isn't just, hey, we're gonna put some pirate stuff on this. It's the notion of how can you use everything at your disposal in order to tell your story, in order to make the theming happen. Because when you look at what problem you're trying to solve, well, the problem is we want people to feel like they're a pirate and they're not, because everything in their life is telling them that they're not. So how can we take all of those things away? Certainly we tried to do it with a bunch of computer graphics and stuff, but we wanted to do more than make a video game. We made this thing that was this 4-screen 3D interactive cave experience. The original proposal was that we were to use a joystick to control it, but we didn't. You can see we use a wooden ship's wheel, and then in order to fire at enemies, you use these 30-pound spun aluminum, cannons. We needed a place for you to stand, so why not make it look like a real boat deck? We had this big decision: should it be 2D or 3D cave? Because 3D is way more expensive, because now you've got to render 8 images instead of 4 images. And we decided to go for 3D, not necessarily for the reason you might think, because you might think it would be all about, we want to, hit you in the face with a cannonball. And at first we were excited about that, but when we started experimenting with it, we realized that with 3D, your eyes would relax to the horizon, just like when you're out in a boat at sea. The very muscles of your eyes started to relax and make you feel like you were at sea. And we realized we needed to have that. We needed, of course, to make sure you didn't fall out of here. And so we could have just put a velvet rope, but we didn't. We put like a ship's rope with a brass hook at the end. And of course, we have to worry about you falling out because we put a motion platform. This whole boat would actually rise up and move about as if you were at sea. And we looked at all kinds of motion platforms. We looked at hydraulic platforms, and we looked at pneumatic platforms, and we looked at mechanical platforms. And we ended up picking pneumatic. And the engineers at first were like, don't pick pneumatic, it's the least reliable, it has a lot of issues, it's not perfectly, accurate. And we said, yeah, but it's so squishy, it makes you feel like you're on a boat at sea. And it really works that way. Even little things like we had to find a place for people to put their purses and things. So we could have put a little plastic shelf, but instead we put a net because it was more theming. It was one more way to make you feel like a pirate. When we talked to the people making the sound system, because we said we want sound from all directions because it's you're being attacked and we want all kinds of sound. And the sound guy said, okay, we'll use like a 12-speaker LCS system. I guess those cannons are important. We said, yeah, the cannons are important. And they said, well, then subwoofers, right? And I said, yeah, subwoofers, yeah, big boom of a cannon. That'll help tell our story. And they said, where do you want them located? And I said, I don't know what tells the story best. And the guy says, well, not a lot of people know about subwoofers, but if you place them at exactly the right distance from the guest, the waveform will collapse in your stomach and literally shake your guts. And I said, oh my God, that's so perfect! And so he's like, yeah, we did all the measurements and we put them just lined up right so that when you pulled that candy, you really felt your insides shake. Even we had things like, oh, and even with the lighting, we knew we had to light the room, and we could have just put any lighting. You can see the lighting there. It looks like kind of reflections off the water, and it was actually animated gels that would move so that it really looked nice. Even the air conditioning system. The air conditioning guys came to us and said, do you care where we put the vents? We've got to put vents in here. And we could have said, who cares where you put the vents? I don't care. But instead we said, ooh, how can vents tell our story? How about like the wind like blowing through your hair as your ship sails through the ocean? Yeah, put them in front, kind of blowing backwards over, and then they should put them wherever you want, we don't care, you know. And so we tried to do that as much as we could, you know, theming is just the way you think at the Disney company. And even outside, as you're waiting in line, you can kind of see here, it's a little bit of a composite shot. We tried to make the waiting in line queue, work out pretty, that way. You can see there, there's my laser beam. You can see over here, like that's the little cash register where you pay to go in, and that's themed up. And we had this big mural on the walls, and the mural painter said, do you care how we paint this? And we said, well, we want it to look just like the real game. And they said, okay, how about kind of like this? And we said, you know what, we're going to put glass doors on each of these because we want people to see in, see what's going on. Could you line the horizon up from the outside to the inside? And they said, yeah, just mark the wall, tell us where it's going to be. And so we managed to do that so that the horizon line out there matched the horizon lines there just perfectly. And we tried to use everything. We tried to use, could light fixtures help theme and tell our story? Could the trash can, in a trash can help tell our story? Yes, everything, trying to make you feel like a pirate. The one place where we really blew it was these 3D goggles, these IMAX 3D goggles. We did a little bit because they normally had little wings on the side to keep light from coming in on the sides because they're designed for movie theaters. But we needed light on the sides because we understood about the human perceptual system. The human perceptual system has motion detectors on the sides. You know when you're sitting on a train or a bus and the one next to you starts to move and you're like, oh, we're moving. Oh no, it's just those guys are moving. That's because the side motion is what makes you feel like you're moving. And so by having that cut off, we knew you wouldn't feel like you were moving. So we made special arrangements with IMAX to have those special versions made where they were removed. But the problem is, look at them. They're not themed up. They look like some weird bug-eyed Terminator thing. And we tried all kinds of stuff. We tried to put on bandanas, and it was a cleaning nightmare, and that didn't make sense. One smart ass in our group said, well, let's put an eye patch on, then we don't have to do the 3D. Right? And that wasn't a good idea. So eventually we just gave up, and we left it just, okay, we don't know how to theme that. We're going to let that one go. And after we'd installed it, we went down to check on it in a few weeks. And you wait in line, you see how the whole thing's doing, you see what everybody's saying, and there's excitement and things. And they go to let us in, and the cast member in their pirate costume comes up and says, "Avast ye now! Before you board your ship, first you must don the eyes of Bluebeard." And they gave us the 3D glasses, and we're sitting there thinking, we wrote a script for you. This isn't the script. What is this? This is so much better, right? Because that's the good thing. When you theme and you theme and you theme and you theme, when there's holes in your theming, everybody can see what problem you're trying to solve, and everybody can participate. Everybody can help. And so anyway, so that's just an example of like the excitement and the power of theming. And so the question now that a lot of my work has moved on into the realm of educational games, or some people say serious games, the question is, can this kind of theming, can this be useful? Does this approach make sense here? And first I just want to mention this term serious games that comes up a lot. I'm not a fan of this term very much because it implies things I don't like. It makes it sound like if you accidentally had fun playing one of these games, that maybe you're doing it wrong. I had someone come to me once and say, "Hey, I'm trying to make a game that teaches comedy. Can you help me with this?" And I'm like, "Is this a serious game? I can't figure it out." So the phrase I've been using is, I like the phrase transformational games because it focuses on the goal of what we care about, which is transforming people. The goal of these games is to change people in some way. So just real quick, I want to tell you about, at Schell Games, we have a certain transformational game design process. And I'll talk about that a little bit, and then I'll go into an example of using this notion of sort of deep theming in order to meet transformational goals. So we're very big on beginning with kind of what is the problem we're trying to solve? What is the high-level outcome? Why are we really doing this? That's a big one for us. Then we say, okay, what do we have? Who are the people we have? Who are the experts we have? What are the platforms we have? Then a big piece of this is this exchange of expertise between the development team and the experts. We don't always have the experts on our team. Very often, some folks have come to us and they say, you know, we know about teaching this, but we need help making a game. And we have this process for kind of getting expertise back and forth, because the game developers need to learn what they can from the subject matter experts, but at the same time, the subject matter experts need to learn from the game developers about what works and doesn't work, so that this conversation can be strong. After that, we get very specific about defining the transformational goals, and usually there's more than one, and I'll talk about that. We talk quite a bit about like what are the key theories that we're using, what is the knowledge, what's the experience, what are the skills we need people to achieve in order to meet these goals. And then what are the right strategies within this game that are going to support that transformation? And then of course you've got to build it and you play test it and you iterate. And very often it turns out that this means you have to iterate on your transformational goals. You go and you build your game and you're like, you know what? This doesn't do quite what we wanted, but it does something else. And maybe we should change what we're doing as we're building it. Anyway, that's just sort of high level, but I wanted to, the example I wanted to get into is a game we've been working on for a couple years now. I think I gave a talk here 2 years ago, and I mentioned that, hey, we're beginning work on this, and what's exciting is we're getting ready to finally launch it. This is definitely the biggest app I have ever worked on. We've had, at our team, about 60 people working on this for 2 years, so it's fairly significant that way. And of course, we're working, it's not just us, we're working with many other developers. There's probably another 40, 50 people outside our team, so it's been over 100 people for 2 years putting this whole thing together. And it's going to go into schools sometime in the next 2 months, somewhere between November and January, we're going to start testing in schools. So I will tell you a little about it and show you some examples. And just to be clear, we're working on it with Amplify Learning. They're the ones who really got, they're the ones who initiated this and came to us, and they've been very much the partner of the publisher for this game. So here's the notion of the game, because it's a very unusual notion. So Amplify's notion in general, their business model is interesting. They see what the textbook companies are doing in terms of moving into the digital age, and they feel like there's room for some serious jumping forward. And so they are moving in hard, trying to kind of move in big in the realm of digital textbooks. And one of their philosophies is that it's great to have a curriculum. That's a good and important thing for a school, but it's not enough. That these new tablets, because they really envision a world where almost every kid is going to have, it's going to be one-to-one in terms of tablets. Every kid's going to have a tablet. It'll just be totally normal part of school. That if that's true, why would you just give them curricular materials there? Why wouldn't you give them something more? So they've been investing significantly in something that's kind of akin to the school library. Because some people say, well, your games aren't part of the curriculum. That means they're no good. Is the school library no good because it's not part of the curriculum? I mean, the purpose of the school library is to let kids explore on their own and find things that are interesting and meaningful to them. So that's a lot of what we've been doing. So specifically, the goal of Lexica is to address this problem that a lot of kids start opting out of reading once they reach middle school. And as a transformational goal, our goal with this game is to try and get them to become lifelong readers. So it's a very interesting goal and an interesting ambition. Now, the thing I wanted to talk about was in terms of this question of theming and theming and theming, what we found is that what works really well, and I want to talk about this because I've never heard anyone talk about it, is that what we're finding, and we found this in a number of games that we've done, is that just coming up with one method for trying to reach a specific transformation often is risky, and because what if that one method doesn't work? And very often it's possible to come up with multiple methods. And so with Lexica, for example, we have 9 completely separate different methods that are all meant to reach this one goal of getting middle school kids interested in reading and getting them to become lifelong readers. And this is kind of complicated here, but I'll go through it with some examples. But before I do that, I'm going to show you a video, just kind of a trailer for Lexica, so you can get some understanding of kind of what it is and what it is about. Hopefully the audio will work. Ooh, sounding good.
Welcome to the world of Lexica. A place where your curiosity is free to explore a world brimming with stories and create new ones of your own. Here, characters emerge from their text to help you start on the adventure. You see, in Lexica, books are alive, and now they need your help. You will meet some who want to see creativity controlled, and some who would see it destroyed. But neither can happen as long as your creative powers shine through. Here is where your own story begins. Explore the world of Lexica, dedicated to literature and lore throughout history. Watch as the world unfolds into a realm limited only by human imagination. Engage with characters to help you on your quests, and watch out for the dark voids that will try and stand in your way. Will you be the one to save Lexica from a looming threat? What is the mysterious force that is destroying this beautiful world? Encounter a variety of minigames to challenge you along the way. Which will you master? Grow and change as you explore the rich world around you. What will you choose to become? Build worlds to share your own stories with others. What will you create? Gather up your friends and new allies. Spread across worlds of narrative adventures to become the hero of your tale. Only your curiosity and creativity can bring to life the world of Lexica.
Okay, so that gives you kind of a high. So let me talk about how it works and the many things that we do. So in terms of these 9 approaches, I'm just going to tick through them here. So the first one is the notion of mindset theory. So this is Carol Dweck theory that a lot of people are here are probably familiar with, but some of you might not be. And the notion of it is that there are 2 radically different mindsets about the notion of intelligence. The idea being that some people believe that intelligence is something you're born with, and other people believe that intelligence is something you can get better at. And Carol Dweck's finding was that it makes a tremendous difference which of these beliefs you have. Because if you believe that intelligence is something you're born with, and you encounter a hard challenge that's too hard for you intellectually, your conclusion is, I should stop doing this because this is just a waste of my time. Whereas if instead you believe intelligence is something that grows over time, then hard challenges are interesting to you because it's a growth opportunity. And her studies have showed that this mindset makes a tremendous difference in how students approach things. And so our overarching story in Lexica, and it's designed to be a 3-year story. This story takes place, the goal is you start playing this game in 6th grade, and then you play it 6th grade, 7th grade, 8th grade, in a way I'll talk about a little bit later. And it's a long story, and it is very much based in this theory, and this premise of sort of there are good librarians and bad librarians, and the bad librarians very much believe the notion that difficult books are not for everyone, and in fact it's a good idea to keep the stupid people away from them because they're just going to ruin them. And so gradually, more and more, they're sort of pushing people out of the books. But the problem is in the mythology of the world, books that aren't read end up dying because the characters in them die. And so the characters start coming out and wanting to work with you, and this rebellion inside the library starts happening. The notion that everybody should be able to participate in these stories. So one is to kind of like, let's kind of communicate this through story. A second idea is that one of the reasons, because we looked at a lot of the research about reasons that kids stop reading. One of them is the world of literature is somewhat alien to them. It seems weird and unfamiliar and not something that's part of their lives. And so the idea was, we're going to bring out a lot of characters from literature and make them your companions in this game. So we have all kinds of characters. We have there's characters from Dickens novels and Frankenstein and Jane Austen and Jekyll and Hyde and Heidi, and you'll see Blake's tiger burning bright over on the right there. And these all just become characters who kind of aid and assist you and become your partners in the game. So the idea being that when you actually encounter these works of literature, these are a little bit familiar to you. And I guess it's worth mentioning at this point, one of the things that's unusual about Lexica is it has an integrated e-reader that has hundreds of books in it. It has lots of classics in it, but it also has modern books, modern kind of teen fiction in it. And the characters in the story, in the world, are aware of the books, and they can point you to them. And when they're referenced in the game, at any point you can tap it and boof, the book opens up and you can start reading immediately if you care to. And one of the things that's really fun is the characters in the world, they don't just know about their own book, they know about other books. So Maid Marian is one of the characters, and in the game she's kind of, she does some amount of archery, and so she's kind of this badass archer in the game, and she talks about one of her favorite books being The Hunger Games, which is kind of fun. So here's a video just talking about the characters as friends that shows what some of the interactions like here. Sorry, it's a little bit of an eye test here, but here's Frankenstein's monster saying, "Friends are a rare gift, and I will defend them with all the strength in my borrowed bones." So we have no recorded dialogue in the entire story because it's about reading, right? So part of the idea is with these pieces of dialogue that we're trying to bring the vocabulary that is at the appropriate level of challenge for their grade level. And so a big part of what we're trying to do also is build vocabulary, syntax, and those sorts of things. Because another reason that kids stop reading is because maybe they got a little behind in their grammar and their reading and their vocabulary. And so books that are designed for their age are a little too tough for them, and the younger books are baby books, so they just sort of stop. So part of what happens here is there are a lot of integrated games that are designed to sort of build up these things in a way that's as fun as possible. So I'll show a quick example of one. This is a game called Inklings Underground that we created, and it's based on research that shows that mastery of morphology does a great deal to build your vocabulary. That is, your ability to break words into pieces and rebuild them into new words does a great deal for your vocabulary. So in this game, you'll see that actually happening.
Their brain and sinister corruption tarnishes these once wondrous habits. Help the brain with humbling block, cleanse the tunnels below. Dig through the dirt to uncover word puzzles. Use your wits to solve tricky word puzzles. Clear the caves of the corruption. Plan Locke's path carefully. Use your word knowledge to get right to the root of the problem. Puzzling pitfalls and cryptic caves will test the limits of your vocabulary.
So it fits a little. We have this character who sort of drills through the dirt, sort of a different kind of vocabulary drill, as it were. So it's very much an action puzzle, but your ability to solve it means carrying around those different word pieces and mixing them up. And we have about, I guess, about 15, 16 games that are about that level of depth and quality and to take on different aspects of grammar and syntax. And I mentioned, making sure to have a story that exercises their reading skills, and so there's an awful lot of reading that is just necessary in this. And it's whenever possible we make it interactive. We don't just have them click through pages of text. They're choosing meaningful responses throughout, and we tried very hard to design it so that the vocabulary level is at the right level for them. Gateway books is something that the research has shown is very important. One of the things that starts people reading is some book that they just connected with. And so we tried hard. We've looked at research on lists of successful gateway books. We have as many of them in there as we can, and we have connections to ones that we can't legally have in there. We have them mentioned, we have pointers to them. And then on top of that, we have the characters have conversations with you, trying to discern what books you might like and figure out what your interests are and recommend books. So there's a lot of sort of recommending of books that happens in here. One, for example, that's been shown is that the Peter Pan for the 6th graders is a pretty good gateway book. That there's actually a lot in it. And so there's kind of a scene here where the notion of even though Peter Pan's not a character in the game, the Captain Hook ship is one of the items you can manifest into the world. And there's just a scene showing that here. Another thing is a lot of kids don't have time to read. It's just not in their schedule. When is the time when I read? And we try and take that on in 2 ways. One is we're trying to secretly steal their video game time and turn it into reading time, is part of it. And then another part is a little strange. We were very concerned about if we just gave them this really rich game and they just played it, and we didn't do any reading, that would be kind of bad. And we didn't want to put parts where it's like, stop. You may not continue until you've read X and Y and Z, because we don't really know if they're reading. So we couldn't really do that. So instead we're doing something that's sort of like television production. It's become very popular now. You know, binge watching has become something that's become very much a part of the culture. The episodes are released in a way I don't think anyone's ever done before, since this is designed to be work with schools. You start in 6th grade and in September you get chapter 1, and when October shows up, chapter 2 becomes available, and then in November chapter 3 becomes available, and there are chapters on and on throughout your school year. And so if you're into this, you will be caught up, and then you'll kind of run out of content a little. There's some side quests and things you can do, but at the point that you've kind of caught up with the game's kind of like, yeah, and there's all this reading you can do. Check out all these books, and they're all here. So we're trying to kind of create a rhythm where there's game to play. Well, there's less game. You can read. There's lots of reading to do. It's a little bit of an unusual approach, but we're eager to see if it's going to work. Another one is incentivizing reading. This is, of course, a very controversial notion, the idea of, we're going to give you points for reading, because how do we know how thoroughly you read? This is often the criticism of things like the Pizza Hut booking system and things like that. So we decided to be very gentle with that, but still, there do seem to be some benefits from it, and so we decided we would do it in a gentle way. And so the notion is the e-reader has integrated in it a kind of a quiz system. If you're interested, you can ignore the quiz system if you want to, but if you're interested in it, time to time you'll be reading and a little thing pops up on the right side and it says, hey, here's a question, you want to answer this question? And if you answer the questions correctly, you will unlock items in the game. They're not items that you're required to have, they're sort of vanity items and things. You can see you can get quite elaborate kind of dressing up your character. And then further, you can use them in the world of Scriptus, which I'll show you in a minute. So there's some level of gentle incentivizing happening. Another thing that stops middle school kids from reading is they have a belief that their classmates don't read. And since if they believe that's true, then it doesn't make sense for them to read. But very often reading is something that people do quietly and privately and don't necessarily talk to their friends about. So there are opportunities in here for you to, when you've read books, you can have that be listed publicly. When I say publicly, it means just within your class group. And you can see a world map. We use a world map to represent reading because we just show where the different stories took place. And you can see where your classmates and your friends have been reading. And so we like the idea that it sort of makes it kind of a matter of public record, if you choose to share it, what you have and haven't been reading. And then the last one is letting them experience the joy of writing. There's research that shows that students who are interested in writing and engage in writing, there's a strong connection between that and reading. But very few students have had a chance to experience the joy of writing. They've experienced the suffering of writing that comes through difficult assignments that they're not interested in. But the joy of writing is something different. And very often, middle school kids we've found, have a very confused conception of the way writing happens. they tend to believe that books are written as they are read. That someone starts on page 1 and they write until they get to the end in just a straight line. And they try to do that, it doesn't work, and they believe, I guess I'm not a writer because I can't write like that. When the truth is there's some amount of outlining and plotting and things. So we have this system that shows how stories are really made, and it lets them do it, but they don't create linear stories. They create the thing they've always wanted to make, which are interactive stories. So we'll show a little bit of a video of some of this happening. You can see here in this slide we're showing, like, hey, stories have a structure, and you're going to take out the different pieces and you're going to fill in some of it. But it's not a purely textual system. You can see here. So this is somebody filling in a thing about what does this sort of motion do when you interact with it. And as these different, he asks you questions about do you want to drink it, not drink it, what happens when you drink it, what happens when you don't drink it, and so it gives you different choices. So you can fill in a little dialogue thing, and then that goes into the world. And so it's sort of like kind of a Minecraft thing where you kind of build up a world, except that you can also name characters and set it up for people to interact with. I love that they load, this is a video, an actual video of one of the kids playing, and they loaded up the character Heidi, who's the character in the game, and they labeled her the apprentice witch, right? So you can repurpose everything that we give you in the game, turn these into interactive stories, and then you can post these for all your classmates to experience. And so far there's been a lot of excitement about that. That's been going quite well. And so there you go. So there's our 9 transformational methods with Lexica. And I guess the big point for me is that even though we have one central goal, we're approaching it kind of from these 9 different directions, partly with the idea that if some of them might not work, and if some don't work, maybe the others can kind of pick up the slack. And also we think they sort of, like the pirates thing, they reinforce each other, and hopefully they also, since they're all moving toward a common goal. So to wrap it up here, I guess one thing I always recommend is if you're trying to create transformational games, you should always ask these questions. What problem am I solving? What are the many ways that it can be addressed? And what collection of harmonious solutions will make for the best game? Thanks very much.